Bedtime stories. Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there were two brothers and sisters named Hansel and Gretel. Hansel was a boy and Gretel was the girl. They lived with their father, who was a woodcutter. Their family were very poor, but always happy living together. One day, their father got remarried, and his new wife moved in to live with them. The family became even more worse and did not have any money left. They could not raise the two children anymore, so they thought to leave their children in a forest. While the father and his new wife were discussing, Hansel and Gretel thought of a way to come back to the house. When their parents were asleep, Hansel and Gretel came out to find as much breadcrumbs and pebbles as they could. In the next morning, Father took them walking in the forest. Between the way, Gretel secretly threw down a pebble to make a trail. When the pebbles finished, Hansel carried on and threw the breadcrumbs so they could find their way back home. In the evening, their father left them in the forest and came out alone. Hansel and Gretel tried to find their way back home, but the breadcrumbs were eaten by the birds already. They could not find their way back home and got lost deep in the forest. They both were exhausted and hungry until they reached to a house. The house was made with bread and cakes. With hunger, they began to eat different parts of the house, and when both children were full, they fell asleep. In the middle of that night, the door opened with an old, strange-looking woman walking out. The old woman saw the two children sleeping in front of her house, so she carried them inside. When Hansel and Gretel woke up, they were in a cage. The old woman locked them in a cage, and the woman was a wicked witch. She forced Gretel to be her maid to clean and lock Hansel in the cage. The witch had a plan to feed Hansel fat and eat him as food. Every day after the children ate, the witch would come to check and see how fat Hansel got. She would kill Hansel to point out his finger, but he is smart, so he would point out a bone for her to touch. The witch had bad sight, so she thought he was still too thin to eat. Time passes and the witch could not wait any longer. She was very hungry, so she told Gretel to open the oven to cook Hansel. Gretel was very afraid of the witch, but she tried to think of a way to help him. Gretel knew that the witch's eyes were almost blind, so she thought of a plan. She told the witch that the oven was not working and asked her to explain how to use it. The witch got very angry and opened the oven. In that moment, Gretel pushed the witch in the oven and shut the oven door. The witch had powerful magic, so she did not burn easily, but at the end, the witch died because she could not escape from the burning hot oven. Gretel helped Hansel to get out from the cage, and they both looked around the house. They found valuable gems and gold in the room. After packing the treasure, they both came out of the house. They walked into the forest looking for their way back home, and finally found a pebble on the ground. They were very happy because it was the trial of pebbles that they made. At their home, their father and stepmother were very sad that they left their children in the forest. They both felt very bad for what they did and prayed for the children to come back. Suddenly, the door opened. Hansel and Gretel are back home and they all live happily ever after.